Welcome to the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan, sci-fi and fantasy author. Like you, I've got a lot on my plate. What with many children, a full-time job, a homestead, and loads of other responsibilities. I'm here to bring you inspiration, positivity, and community around having a busy life and still wanting to chase that author dream, even if you have to take a casual approach. For more information about the podcast, me, or my books, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's get started. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 126 of the podcast. Today is Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024, as I'm recording this. And today we're talking to Irene Hill about growing professionally and personally, particularly through your writing. We go into details about how she has grown, things that have happened in her life, how her writing has helped her to grow, as ways that you can leverage growth to move forward and progress in anything that you're doing. So I think you'll want to stick around for that conversation. Of course, we always like to start with homestead updates, though there aren't a lot of updates this week. I think the biggest key item is that we sold a goat and her baby. So, as you know, when we have the babies each year, the hardest thing is finding new homes for them because I believe the market is a little bit saturated where we are in Idaho. So, finding new homes can be tricky, particularly because, not a lot of people are looking compared to how many people are selling. But we were able to sell her as well as one of the boys as well. So, that yeah, it's different not having as many goats, and it's going to be a little bit different to not have any goats eventually. I think that's going to be a little bit of a longer term goal. We still have one goat that we're milking actively, another one that is in milk, but we're just letting her daughter, the doeling, have all of the milk. So we're really only getting about half a gallon of milk a day, which is fine for now. I mean, it's mainly just to provide for our daughter, who's still drinking milk. She just stopped nursing not too long ago, as well as, for drinking and other uses when we need it. We do have everything that we need for now, but we're looking forward to when the cow is in milk because she will give us around 2 to 4 gallons a day. And when we have to feed the baby, because we're going to pull the baby immediately, we'll give him or her, depending on if it's a boy or a girl, as much milk as they need, and then we'll take the rest at least for a little while until the calf is grown. So yeah, we'll have to make some plans for what to do with all of that milk. We've made cheese historically. We make yogurt. The difference between cow's milk and goat's milk is something that we'll be able to, I think it'll be easier to deal with, is if you don't know this about goat's milk is naturally homogenized. So it doesn't really separate. You can let it sit for a long time. A little bit of cream will separate, but for the most part, it's going to stay together. You don't really have to shake it too much to keep everything together. Cow's milk is not naturally homogenized. It will separate very, very quickly. So when you buy milk at the store, that has been artificially homogenized. I don't know what the process is necessarily to get the cream and the milk to combine. I think they skim a lot of it off anyway. But when ours separates, we will take all or most of the cream and we'll use that to make things like butter, whipped cream, ice cream, sour cream, all those things. So it'll be nice because if we can provide our own butter, then we won't have to buy that from the store. Now, of course, with the skim milk, you have a couple options for that. You can use it in cooking. You can drink it. Probably not going to have a great flavor, but it is an option. Eventually, I think we will get pigs. I don't think that's going to happen this year, but interesting fact, skim milk is actually really good at fattening pigs up. So it's a little bit of a misnomer in terms of messaging from media and other related corporations that skim milk is better for you. Skim milk is the best milk to fatten pigs. So take that for what it is. Not the cream-filled milk, skim milk. So anyway, we don't have to get into the science behind that, but it'll be great to have that much milk and be able to use the cream. Other than that, we did band the boys this week. We don't have to get into too many nitty-gritty details. It's a relatively painless process. It's a little bit painful. That's essentially castrating them. It's a little bit painful for just a short amount of time, and then the nerves die and things numb up, and then it's not so bad after that. I know a lot of people don't love to hear that, but we don't need that many bucks. If we end up keeping them, if we can't sell them, then we'll want them to be wethers. Most people we've talked to have not wanted to buy a buck if you're breeding regularly, then having your own buck is in your best interest. That's why we have one. But other than that, most people just have them for pets, weed eaters, and they're far less aggressive when they don't have all those hormones running through them. So, in fact, we have a wether. His name is Merrick. He's so sweet. He's a great goat. He's very, very friendly. And it's because he was castrated when he was a baby. So we did that this week, and it was about the same time we sold the other ones because the people who did end up buying a boy did not want a buck, so we banded him for them, and then they took him along with Malo and her little white baby. But yeah, I don't believe there's any other updates this week. Just gearing up for our baby coming, and then we'll be preparing as quickly as possible for Ginger to have her baby. That's our cow, for those of you who might be new to the podcast. So, in terms of author updates this week, honestly, work has been kind of insane. That with some time off that I've had, I haven't had a lot of time to do too much writing. Most of what I've been focusing on is just editing here and there where I can, thinking through my strategy for where I want to be over the next year. I have been dabbling in Facebook ads. I've talked about that before, but it's particularly interesting to see human behavior when it comes to responding to images, because some images that I might find interesting or things that I might think I will click on aren't necessarily what the people I'm targeting would click on. So, it's just been a fun experience to figure that out. Doing very minor tests, haven't poured a lot of money into it because obviously I need to figure it out first before I put a huge investment into it. And I anticipate that that's going to take a little bit of time. But if you're listening here and you haven't seen it, I do have a new website for my direct sell store. One thing that I've wanted to do is sell direct for a time. And that's because for a couple of reasons. One, the audience that you have via email list, they're your audience forever as long as those people continue subscribing. Of course, they can unsubscribe. There's no issues with that. But if, my books, heaven forbid, get removed from Amazon for whatever reason, I don't think they would because I'm not in KU. There's really no reason to remove them. But if they decide to shut my account down, I still have my email list that I can work with. So that's one advantage. Two, you generally make more money royalty wise via direct sales. So as an example, if I were to sell my whole series on Amazon, I won't give exact figures, it would be around 33% less that I would get versus direct sale. So I'm getting, a 30 to 40% more money from selling the exact same product directly than I would through Amazon. Now, obviously, Amazon has great channels. The visibility, people are on there to buy books. Kindle's awesome. So definitely not knocking it, but there's something to be said about having your own direct audience, people who are willing to buy from you. So that said, the website is just dankennerbooks.com. That's it. dankennerbooks.com. You can find everything there. I do have a new bundle that I've put together for my ebooks. So, for the Lightbearer Chronicles, I will be doing this for other books as well. The tricky thing with the Cyber Kids of Cyber Cities, I don't own the rights to those books, so I can't sell those directly. But everything else I can. The Hidden Heritage series that I'm working on now, when all 6 books are out, I'll sell the 6 book bundle because who doesn't want a book bundle for a discounted price? But you can actually get all 3 Lightbearer Chronicles books for significantly cheaper. Let's see, I'm trying to think of the actual cost. I want to say 40% cheaper from my website, and I get 40% more money from it. So that kind of gives you an idea of Amazon and the cut that they take from people, which of course they can do whatever they want. They're a big corporation, they can make the rules. But yeah, we can buy that includes the 3 books of the Lightbearer Chronicles as well as um the prequel, which you can actually get for free. But so I don't include that in the price breakdown. I'm only referring to the trilogy. But still, you can get all 4 books for $9.99 on my website at dankennerbooks.com if you're interested. So yeah, other than that, playing with the store, playing with Facebook ads, I'm really hoping to get back into editing this week. Hopefully things can calm down a little bit with work. Although I know the moment that happens, we're gonna have a baby. So, you do what you can. I don't feel frustrated. I take the time that I can here and there, and that's part of, being an author, a casual author, so to speak. Can't always plan for everything, but I'll just wedge it in where I can. Still, I'm enjoying the editing process. I'm still about 50% through editing Dragon Blooded, and it's been fun. I'm being a little bit more critical with my writing than I normally would be, and I'm pretty pleased with it so far. I'm just really sensitive to weird repetitions of words and weird wording of sentences and, some minor plot things. They're not huge, but just character development and character behaviors. It's interesting to go through that again with a different mindset. So, yeah, enjoying that. As you know, I love providing this content for you. I love talking to new authors, discovering things about them, hearing what they're passionate about. And I love providing this content for you, hoping that you can benefit from it. Of course, this is all on my own time. I don't have any sponsors as of yet. Maybe someday I will. But if you'd love to support me on Patreon, I do have a Patreon for the casual author. That is just patreon.com/the casual author. I'll be providing some posts up there. I'll be providing some extra Q&A audio sessions as well as some more updates and pictures from the homestead. So it's just a couple dollars a month. You can decide if you want to support me, but I appreciate any support that you can give. And once again, thank you for listening. Other than that, I don't believe I have any other updates. So we can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with Irene. Hey, Irene, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing very, very well. I'm really thrilled to learn about you and your books. But before we get into the fun part, how long have you been writing and publishing?
So I've been writing probably since the second grade. My birthday is in the summer, and the summer between first and second grade, my great grandma gave me a journal. And if I look back at that journal, there are some journal type things in it, but there are a lot of stories in it too, where I would just write how I wanted things to be instead of how things really were. So I've definitely been writing since the summer before second grade. Um, but I started getting serious about wanting to publish in 2018. I found a group of self-published authors. I didn't really know I wanted to self-publish. I just sort of stumbled upon this group of authors, found out after I found them that they were all self-published, got a lot of information from them, talked to a few traditionally published authors, realized that I am a control freak and I needed to be self-published.
Yeah.
Um, and set some goals for myself, but really wasn't able to attain those goals the way I wanted to. And then everything shut down in 2020. And all of a sudden, all the outside commitments that I had had went away. I was still working, but I was working a lot less because I was working from home.
Hmm.
And I'm an occupational therapist. And so I was seeing patients through telehealth, but a lot of the families had backed out of their appointments. So I was working about half of what I had been. And so all of a sudden I had time. And so my first book came out in May of 2020.
That's great. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people who were able to write more during COVID. So, not necessarily it was not a good thing for COVID to happen, but at least you got some more writing time.
Yeah.
So that's always a good thing. So I'm curious to know because I feel like I'm always impressed with people who have been writing most of their lives. I was not. I started writing in 2018 when you got serious about it, quote unquote. Um, so for you, what made that shift? What was the tipping point for you wanting to be more serious? Was it just excitement at seeing those indie authors and be like, oh, that looks cool. I want to try that? Or was there another tipping point?
Um, so there were a couple things actually. So one of the things was I had been writing a particular story. So, through my teenage years, I have notebooks, like stacks of notebooks of things that I wrote.
Hmm.
Um, and most of them, when I look back, are just angsty teenage stuff.
Right.
Like I would never let it out into the open. Um, but I started a story in 2006, and I just kept reworking it and updating it and rewriting it. And finally, in 2016, I had told my husband, like, I really want to make this a real, something I don't just play around with. I want to make this a real story. And then in 2017, A Really Good Family Friend was published. And that kind of kicked that off that I was like, wow,
Mm,
if she can do it, like I can do it. And then in 2018, I guess from 17 to 18, I kind of was looking for, people who could give me advice And of course, I talked to this family friend and she gave me advice. And then, yeah, in 18, I finally found this group of authors. And that's kind of what finally pushed me over the edge of feeling like, hey, there are other people out there. Like, I can do this.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I love that. It's always great to hear the inspirations behind it because everybody has different reasons for getting started. But, one thing that you mentioned that you're passionate about or something that you um, like to discuss is growth from, like a personal and from a professional perspective. I'm curious to know how that worked with your writing. I mean, obviously you've been writing since second grade, so the growth trajectory is probably insane from those number of years. But even let's say starting in 2018, where have you seen that growth in your life as a result of your writing?
Um, I I've always been a pretty outgoing, if I want something, I just go get it kind of person.
Hmm.
And that actually ended up holding me back some because I met this group of authors. They were all giving me advice, and I grabbed that advice and I ran with it.
Hmm.
And I did not take the time to grow and learn. I was just like, I have this advice, and here we go.
Okay.
And I made a lot of mistakes with my first three books. So in 2020, my first three books are like a serial. They
Hmm.
all, the first two end on cliffhangers, they all have to go together. Um, so they came out in May, August, and December, I believe, or May, September, and December. Um, and there were a lot of mistakes made because I just took this advice. I didn't do my own research and I just ran with it. None of the authors that I talked to wrote in my genre. Um, they all had published at different times than I published. They all had fantastic advice, but it didn't necessarily apply to my situation. And like I said, I'm very, like grab the bull by the horns and go. And so I just did without really slowing down and learning and growing. I just kind of went. And after I did that, about 6 months afterwards, I realized, like, whoa, we have made some mistakes.
Hmm.
So then I was able to, slow down and I left my books out on the market, but I was able to slow down and see, like, okay, this is where I'm seeing problems. And I took those things and was able to go back and say, this is where I need to learn. This is where I need to figure out what's going on. And just recently this year, I have completely rewritten those first three books. The first two are re-released now as second editions. The third one should be re-released in the next few weeks as its second edition. And as I've been doing those rewrites, I've been able to see where, I've done the research. I've taken some, I guess they're not called continuing education when you're an author, but in my
Hmm.
professional world, they would be called continuing education courses.
Hmm.
I've taken some courses, I've done some things, and not only has my, writing grown, my style has grown, but I've learned the appropriate way to do things instead of just, bull in the china shop.
So I love this, and I think I would, if you feel comfortable, I'm curious to know if there's a specific example that might be helpful to authors who are at the beginning of their writing. Maybe a mistake that you made that you realized later that was not the right choice, and you had to go
So,
back.
so without saying any names, there's a very famous author that I love
Okay.
reading who head hops,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely head hops. And she's very famous and she gets away with it. And so because that is someone who I love reading, like I didn't see a problem with it. And I
Mm.
didn't realize that the majority of the world does not get away with that. So my first three books are all over the place.
Interesting. Okay.
And I got a lot of feedback from readers that were like, we can't follow you. Like, we don't know who's talking. Or not talking, but like who's thinking.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, oh, so that's a thing that not everyone gets to do.
Without naming names, I'm pretty sure I know which author you're talking about, but we don't have to name it. And it's interesting. There's very few authors who can do that effectively, and those they do it well, right? I can't either. So,
And I've actually gotten feedback from a few people that are like, "Oh yeah, like in this chapter you did it fantastic, but in
mm,
this chapter I don't know what to say."
interesting. So it was almost easier just to go back and take it out.
Yeah, so that's what I've done. I've gone back and I've taken
Yeah.
it out, and I do have multiple POVs,
Hmm.
because I thought that that was important, but I've taken it to where like there are chapter breaks so that
Mm.
like here we're in Joe's head and here we're in Brett's head.
So how, this might be a tricky question to answer. How did you not feel overwhelmed to go back and rewrite your books, right? Because that's a big job. What motivated you to get it done, to do that?
Well, it took over a year to jump in and do
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
So I did feel overwhelmed. Um, so in my professional job, I'm an occupational therapist. And so I'm
Right.
always working with people on, life balance and living your best life and, making the best of things with like whatever, challenges and disabilities you're living with. And so basically I had to come to that point in my struggle with, wanting to make these books better of being like, look, you teach people to make the best of their challenges, suck it up and make the best of your challenges.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I just had to overcome that overwhelm and that fear because I did have a lot of fear of, what will people think if I have to rewrite these books? Like, are they going to think that I was a failure the first time? And I had
Mm.
some negative input from people around me saying, like, why would you want to do that? That's dumb. And I had to overcome that too. And so it did take over a year for me to really jump in and say, no, this is necessary. And I want to do this. I want to feel that I've put forth my best work. And
Yeah, I
so,
mean,
yeah, it took a while,
you did it,
but
and I think
ultimately
that's
it's
awesome.
best for me.
Yeah. So when you think about the word growth, growth is very rarely comfortable. If you think about all the experiences, I can think of all the instances where I've had to grow, particularly in authoring. I've made plenty of mistakes. We can get into all sorts of those. But how does one deal with that? Right. You mentioned just do it. You help people deal with it every day, but it can be pretty debilitating and depressing when those mistakes happen and you realize you have to learn what do you recommend to people who are feeling really discouraged by that growth?
So, a couple of things that I did is I made an action plan. So it's not like I just took it on all at once.
Sure. Okay.
And I know from the podcast, you're not a planner, and neither am I.
Not at all.
Like one of my favorite memes on Facebook is when it's like, the reader, oh, I'm really excited to see where this book is going. The author, me too.
100% accurate for me. Yes.
Yeah, like I have no idea where I'm going when I start a book. And I can't because if I know where I'm going, it's not fun. Um, but for these rewrites, because obviously I knew where I was going because I was just fixing, the point of views and stuff like that. So obviously I knew where I was going. So I was able to make an action plan, like, in this time frame, I'm going to accomplish these things, and I'm going to have these people look at it. And I had a trusted person, which was my sister, that I was like, hey, I know this is going to be hard because half of me doesn't want to do it. So when I'm struggling, I need to be able to come to you. And she was absolutely
Okay.
like, she's a really good support system for me. So she was absolutely like, yeah, like come to me. And I would text her, or I would call her and I'd be like, I am the worst author ever. I can't do this. I'm gonna give up. And she's like, no, you're not gonna give up. You're not the worst. And my husband is really, really supportive too. Um, but I didn't want to always be complaining to him because he has to live with me. So
I get that.
So, I could call my sister and just, complain, and she'd be like, yep, like, I get it, but you're not the worst author ever. You got this. Just keep going. And so having the plan so that I wasn't trying to do it all at one time and then having that support person were really helpful.
So just thinking about that, because not every author has support people. I love that piece of advice. I think every author should find someone, either one person or, an accountability partner or a group they can maybe, just relate to. But not everybody has that. And so I love your action plan. I love how that helps kind of outline the steps to move forward. That is planning, though, by the way, which I can already tell you now. I would struggle with it. But um, so what do you recommend to people who don't have that? How they might find someone that can support them? Do you have thoughts on access or where they can find a support system?
So I have found that Facebook is a fantastic place. Like literally just get on Facebook and search like author groups. And you can search really specific, like female author groups, Christian author groups. Like there are so many groups out there. And I found I'm not active in very many of the groups, but I have found friends through those groups.
Sure. Okay.
And I think also like a lot of communities have like writing guilds. And for me, it's been really easy because I am hands down an extrovert. So
Yeah.
like, oh, you want me to go to a group? Let's go.
Sign me
And I
up.
know it's a lot harder for introverts, and a lot of writers are introverts. But I think even if you can just go to like one or two of like the Writers Guild meetings
Hmm.
or reach out on like one Facebook group, we're pretty supportive people as writers. At least that's been my experience. And I think there's always somebody out there willing willing to be there for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it probably does help to also be that person for someone else, right? I'm not necessarily proposing you like help everybody. I mean, at some point you have to take time for yourself and everything. But at the same time, I mean, don't be afraid to ask. If there's someone that you relate to or someone who writes similar genre content you just really feel like you might jive with, just try, right? Message them.
Yeah.
The community is so willing to help. And I think that's one thing that I didn't realize when I was a beginning author. I went like a year or two without even talking to any other authors because I was afraid that they would be like, "You're weird. Why are you messaging me?" Which is so dumb because that was no one's reaction. So kind of funny how we do that to ourselves.
And I've found support through people who aren't even authors.
True. Yeah.
Like
Like your
one of
sister,
my
right?
friends one day, like I was talking to her and I was like, yeah, well, I really like to write. And she's like, well, I would love to read what you write. And I was like,
Um,
nope, no, thank you. And like after a year of her bugging me and being like, I really want to, read what you write, I let her read something and she has read a lot of my writing at this point.
that's cool. That's very, very good. Yeah, definitely don't underestimate the non-authors. I don't think about that as well, but support can come from anywhere. So Um, so for for someone who is still at the beginning and they're receiving all sorts of advice, like you said, you met that indie author group and they gave you tons of advice and you just kind of ran with it. What do you recommend for someone who clearly has to go through the growth phase still? How do they sift through all of that advice? Do you have any tips on that?
So I think there are a couple really important things. The first thing that I wish I had done is make sure you're getting advice from someone in a similar genre, um, who has recent advice. Because that was two of my big downfalls, is there were people who had not published recently
I
and
see.
who were giving me advice from like a romance genre, and I write crime thrillers.
So a little
This was
different.
not helpful.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that like publishing isn't just publishing. Like I had no idea that genres differed as far as publishing. Like I understood that, writing a book's going to be different genre to genre, but I didn't know that like being in KU makes sense for some genres, but not others. I just assumed that was across the board.
Yeah, good point.
It's not. So that there were things that definitely like you want to be talking to someone who understands your genre and also just, doing some fact checking. There are forums that you can get on. There are, blogs you can look at. Just doing a quick Google search. I use Atticus for my formatting, and they have a
Nice.
lot of information on their website about publishing and stuff. Like just checking out different resources. Because if I had done that, I would have found a lot of information that would have been like, hey, red flag.
Mm,
Um, and so just, using your resources, asking multiple authors, because I've found since then that in the group I was in, there are a few of the authors that are a little quieter, a little more in the background. If I would have said, like, hey, I'm planning to do this, they would have popped up from the background and been like, hey, slow down.
mm, mm,
But none of them realized that I was taking these couple like front runners' opinions and just going with them.
mhm. Yeah, no,
And
I
so
mean
you just talking to more than one person.
yeah, absolutely a great point. And yeah, the different methods, the different genres, it is crazy how different the market responds and the different methods of publishing change and cover design. And there's so much that needs to align with the genre. So I get that for sure. Um, how how do I say this? How when someone does look at the advice and they do the research and they realize, hey, this is genre specific, um, what do you recommend if they try something and it fails for them despite it being genre specific? Like something that works for one person might not work for another. So what should they do
Yeah.
in that
So
instance?
so I think you have to go in, no matter what you're writing, no matter what you're doing, you have to go into it willing to take a sharp left turn sometimes. It is like throwing
Yeah,
spaghetti at a wall. Like
it's true
I
sometimes.
So, I mean, we're going on 4 years. I am about to put out my sixth and seventh books this year. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to be like, well, that's not how that was supposed to go.
Hmm.
And even when it is good advice, even when you've done your research and it's how it's supposed to work, publishing is a weird world.
It's true.
It just doesn't always work. And you have to be super flexible.
I think the being flexible piece, it's easy for me, right? Being a pantser myself, flexibility is something that I exercise all of my life. But I think there's a lot of people that are like my wife, who is very rigid. She loves planning. She's very meticulous with all of her plans, but then when they get derailed, it's like the worst thing in the world. Once again, not a negative thing. It's just different ways of thinking. Whereas I don't plan for anything. Don't recommend that, by the way. I will never put a plug in for not planning your life. It's really dumb. But, in those instances where things go off the rails, I'm like, it's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, there's all sorts of options. So we complement each other in that way. So when it comes to growth, I mean, like you said, and with authoring, there's so much unexpected things go wrong. You should expect things to go wrong in some cases. Um, what, I guess, how would you approach how do I even say? I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. How would you approach the different methods to solve a problem, right? Because, there's often many different right ways to publishing. So when something goes wrong, how does someone gain the confidence to keep moving forward and trying, especially if they have multiple failures along the way?
So I think that's a hard question for me to answer too, because I'm a pantser
Yep,
and
that's true.
I'm like you. I can plan a few things, but I have pantsed most of my life. Like I went to graduate school. I put in my graduate school application 3 days before it was due.
Sounds like me. Yeah.
Yeah, like I was like, oh, we should do this.
Hmm.
Yeah. But for me, it's always been like, um, oh, so I'm gonna do this method, but I'm gonna have like this and this method on the back burner because they might be things I want to try. So for me, it's always been really easy to be flexible because I'm never really committed to one path
Yeah,
anyway.
that's fair.
But I think it's important to go into it, even if you are a planner,
Hmm.
to go into it kind of knowing like I need a backup plan.
Yeah,
I
true.
need things on the back burner. And like I said, for me, that's just how I roll. But for someone who is a planner, maybe just having that as part of your plan,
That's a good point.
knowing like I need a B and C in the background.
Yeah. That's a really good point. And I think that's something that obviously different levels of planning, pantsing, the growth needs to happen and everybody can recognize that. I really appreciate that you recognize that you pants and that's how you live your life and run things. But, I think something to keep in mind with this whole growth thing is that you just have to kind of buckle up and do it, like you said, kind of at the beginning. And, it's easier to not look at the past. Okay, I say easier. I think I should use the word better. It's better to not dwell on the past. Remember the things you learned, not dwell on it, and move forward with a growth perspective. But I think with growth, and I struggle with this to some degree, how do you balance doing what you want to do versus doing what you know you're supposed to do?
So
Right.
that's actually something that I really had to grow in with my pantsing because there is a certain level of planning that I should do.
Right. Yeah.
And I really had to, especially with marketing. Marketing is
Hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And my husband is more of a planner. And so he's really encouraged me, like, let's set, schedules and let's, set marketing days. And it's been really, really hard for me. But that's something that I've had to grow in is like, yeah, this is not something I want to do, but it's something I should do. And so I've been working toward that.
Hmm.
Um, and one way I've been trying to encourage myself to do that is tracking the benefits.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
So,
What?
like, oh, I followed the schedule and, this is what happened because of it. So that I
Hmm.
can go back and be like, see, this was not terrible. It did not ruin anything. It actually, benefited me in this way. Um, and I still don't like it, but it has helped me to stick with it.
Okay. No, I think, and this one's it's so silly when we're talking about this, and people listening are probably like, of course, why wouldn't you recognize the benefits of something? But no, it's such a little thing, right? And I guarantee I don't do that most of the time. I'll do something around market. I also don't like marketing, by the way. And I'll be like, oh, I know I need to do this. I'll do it. And then after I'm like, I still regret doing that. But I think it really just comes down to I'm just not looking at it the right way. Because there are some advantages and rewards, benefits from doing some of the things you quote unquote have to do. So I'm glad you brought that up. Do you write them down or is it mainly just like a mental exercise that you do?
No, I have been trying to write them down, like so that I
Okay.
can literally go back and be like, see, when I did the thing I didn't want to do, this is what happened.
Putting it in paper on paper, also something I struggle with. But yeah, I really like that perspective. So I want to know, you mentioned something around the head hopping, something that, from a growth perspective you had to learn. I'm curious to know from like a business standpoint, because as much as we all don't want to talk about it, it's not just skipping through the fields, writing books and pushing the publish button, right? There's a lot of marketing and post-publication work that needs to be done. So on that front, from a growth perspective, what are some of your biggest learnings from when you first started publishing to today around that marketing?
Um, One of the things that I have learned, so there are two things. I didn't know what an arc reader was. I had no
Oh, yeah.
idea. And so learning about arc readers and finding them and sending out the arcs and organizing that, like that was a huge learning curve for me.
Hmm.
Huge. And then another thing that I have learned that is still really, really hard for me is, being on social media
Mm.
and trying to stay with the plan. Because again, I'm a pantser. And so like my Instagram is all over the place.
Yep.
And Instagram is where I'm most active. But I'm telling you, like it is all over the place. And I try to stay like on track. And sometimes it's better than others. But I know, and this is one of those things, like I absolutely know the more that you can stay with one theme, no matter what social media you're on, if you can stay with one theme and really be targeted, it's better. But my little pantser brain cannot stay on target. I've got chickens, I've got Wyoming landscape, I've got Idaho landscape, I've got snippets. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just you. I'm the same way. And honestly, I didn't really think much about how my, you know, discovery writing, pantsing, in everything does affect my social media. I can't even tell you the number of times I've tried to sit down and create a marketing social media plan. Like Mondays, I'll post this, and Wednesdays, I'll post this. It usually lasts about 2 weeks, and like it's like I forget about it. I don't know what it is. Probably the ADHD in me. I just completely forget about the plan and just go off the walls and do whatever. Now, yes, that the social media does benefit from niche, really targeting down your audience, focusing on those things. I've noticed it does very, very well. I'm just not very good at that. So glad to know it's not just me. So have you still found benefits in Instagram though? Because you mentioned Instagram is one of your focuses, and have you still found some benefits from posting there, even
Yeah, like
randomly?
I've still found that I've found some readers there, and more than anything, I've found a good community there.
Okay.
And like I said, like I'm an extrovert, I'm very much a connector.
Hmm.
So I've enjoyed the community there, if nothing else. And I do have readers that I know have come from there. So I've kind of kept it up. I tried TikTok. Whew, that's not my thing.
It's okay. I don't blame you. It's weird. It's
Like,
definitely
and I
not my thing
still
either.
once in a while throw up a video on TikTok, but it's not something that I do consistently. Um, and I do have a Facebook, but again, not consistent on Facebook. Um, and I haven't found any benefit from Facebook, and I actually got my Facebook marketing privileges taken away because the bots didn't like something that I put in one of my ads.
Oh, do you know what?
I do.
Oh, okay. So at least you know what it was. It wasn't like a complete shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it told me what it didn't like.
Oh, I see. I haven't done a lot of ads in Facebook, so.
Yeah. Anyway,
So I
it was
think,
it was something political that I didn't realize was political, but
oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Danger zone. Definitely. I don't generally think about or talk. That's why it's easier to write in fantasy worlds where the politics can be quite different from existing politics today. So I want to talk a little bit about consistency because you mentioned consistency around social media and marketing. And I think there's something to be said about someone who can get themselves into a consistent growth um trajectory is what I'm looking for, because growth is something that can be stunted if you're not doing or focusing on the right things. So how do you recommend someone get into the place where they can continue moving, to the right and up in terms of graphically speaking?
so something that I have really focused on, not only with my writing, but with my professional career, and something that I focus on with the people I work with. Currently, I work with kids, and so it's a little bit different.
I
But
see.
I do work with quite a few teenagers, and they're of the age that you can really help them focus on their own goals. Um, is small steps every day.
Hmm.
So when I've been rewriting these books, I try, and it's been really difficult. We've had a family emergency the last couple of weeks, so
Hmm.
hasn't been so good the last couple of weeks. But um, I work on the book every day, the rewrite book. So even if I'm working on other projects, which I've got like four of them going right now
Hey.
because that's
Yep.
how I roll.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I work on the growth project every day, even if it's only like 200 words.
Hmm.
I make sure to do something in the area that I want to grow every day.
Yeah.
Um, and like I said, even if it's something small, so for right now, it is, working on the rewrite. Um, when I'm doing a course, I'll try to do something in the course every day, whether it's, an assignment from the course or just rereading something. So whatever that growth area is, putting aside, 10 or 15 minutes. And then if I get into it and I'm really enjoying it, yeah, I'll spend an hour on it. Absolutely. But carving out whatever time I've set aside for myself, and usually for me, it's 15 minutes,
Mhm.
that is going to be focused on that growth project so that every day I'm at least looking at it and spending some time on it. And sometimes, like you said, growth is hard and it's painful. And at the end of that 15 minutes, I let myself say, this is enough. Like I can't do any more today. But like I said, sometimes, I get into it and I'm like, this is great. And I'm doing so awesome today.
Yeah.
And I spend an hour on it. And so, and I like you, I have kids. And so sometimes an hour is just not going to happen anyway. But
In fact, during this call, I already had a couple of kids knocking on the door. So it's okay. Their mother was like, children. So I get it. Yeah, I totally get the time break and interrupting. So I do like that you mentioned the daily growth thing, and even just having, you don't plan ahead perhaps, but it's just like this mindset of I want to learn. I want to learn different things every day. Just getting your brain in that almost moldable habit of seeking to learn something, however great or small. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind because when we stop learning, we start plateauing. Uh, and I think that's something people maybe forget about, particularly with writing. I mean, someone I can't recall who said this, but someone says by the time you've written your millionth word, you will have flourished as an author and kind of found your voice, and you have gone through that growth period of writing. And I think a lot of people don't think about that the importance of just moving forward and growing. So
yeah.
very excellent insight. So you're about to publish your sixth and seventh books, which are coming out soon. What's the timeline for publishing those books?
So I'm hoping the sixth one will be out in July
Okay,
and the seventh sometime in the fall.
nice. It sounds like me. No hard dates, just like yeah,
Nope.
they'll come. They'll come when they're. I don't like to say publish dates until everything is completely ready. So
Yeah.
just in case life happens.
So I had a hard published date for the second edition of my third book.
Hmm.
And then my father-in-law got really sick,
Hmm.
and all my rewriting on my third book hit a hard stop.
Yeah,
And honestly, in the month of May, I don't think I've really done any words on my third book. So,
it happens. Totally happens. And I think that's the one nice thing about being well, I mean, one of the many nice things about having your own deadlines and being an indie author is you don't have to rush it and you can
yeah.
give yourself some room to wiggle, which is very nice. But and I want to talk a little bit about your book because you said you write crime thrillers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Um, so of your upcoming books, are these part of a series or are they standalone books?
Yes. No, so that's another one of the growth things that I did.
Okay.
So my first three, like I said, the first two end on cliffhangers. Like I've always touted them as a trilogy. And then what I'm now calling books 4 and 5, I told people, oh, these stand alone, you can read them on their own. And they do. As far as they don't have cliffhangers, they're their own stories, but they follow the same characters.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
happen after books 1, 2, and 3. So yes, they're their own stories, but you really need to know the backstory of the characters. So that was something that I had really wanted them to be standalones. But I had to embrace that I didn't write them as standalones, even though I wanted to believe that I had. You really need to read them all in order. So as I'm re-releasing everything, I have made them into one series. I've retitled, or I will be retitling books 4 and 5 so that they all are branded correctly. And I'm recovering books 4 and 5 as well so that they're all branded correctly. And then 6 and 7 will have matching titles and covers as well.
Nice.
So yeah, they're a 7 book series, and the series will be over with book 7. Um, but yeah, it's all the same police officers. detectives and it follows them. This is not a category in Amazon or anywhere else really, but when I self-market them, I call them small town crime thrillers because
Okay.
they're kind of, focused on these two, yeah, small town guys that work in a sheriff's department. And yeah,
Very cool. It's giving me like Bones vibes, the TV show. It's where it's
kind of,
just like
yeah,
they're very. You could watch any one of the episodes at any time throughout the season. I love Bones, by the way. I haven't seen it in a while, but I've watched them all, and you understand there's a crime. It starts with the crime, it ends with the crime, but at the same time, there's just like this really character development needs to happen, particularly with series, and it's something I love. I think this it's almost serial like in fashion, like you mentioned before where yeah, you are getting episodic stories per book, but you're seeing the character grow from book one to book seven, however big the series is. So I would be surprised if you get to seven and you think you're done. So this is the type of thing where they just keep cropping up, things keep happening. So
yeah.
which would be great. You have that flexibility, which is so cool. I appreciate your conversation. This is very insightful, and I think growth is something that everyone should keep in mind and seek to develop. Develop your growth sounds so silly, but it's true. But we are running a little bit short on time. So tell us, where can people find more information about you and your books and your authoring?
So the easiest place to find me is irenehillauthor.com. And then I'm on Instagram as Irene Hill Author. I'm on Facebook and TikTok under the same name. Like I said, Facebook and TikTok, you're not going to find a ton of stuff from me, but I am there off
Hmm.
and on. Um, I don't have a newsletter currently. It took a tragic trip
Nosedive.
to Narnia. I changed email addresses
I see.
and it was hooked to my old email address and I got locked out of it.
Oh boy, it's
So
wild.
it I went to log into it and it was like, you need to verify that you are you. We've sent you an email. And I was like, but I can't get to that email address.
How helpful. Very helpful.
So yeah, I can't get into my newsletter. So I don't currently have a newsletter. I am working on rebuilding that. Um, and then my email is just irenehillauthor@gmail.com. So you can
Very
reach me
cool.
there as well.
Awesome. Well, good luck on publishing over the next few months. Hopefully, you're able to get those out. But thank you so much for this conversation. It's been excellent.
Thank you.
I hope you found that insightful and encouraging. Speaking with Irene was very positive, and hearing about growth and treating everything from a growth perspective is just a better way to approach life and your writing because things happen, things go wrong, and they don't have to debilitate your motivation or your career or your goals. So it's great to hear of her perspective and the things that she's been through. But next week, we'll be talking to Danny Abernathy about self-discovery through your writing as well as the Enneagram. So that's something that I don't have a lot of experience with. Talking to her was fascinating about the different personality types, how I can leverage that to build your characters, write your characters correctly if you know the personality types of your characters. It's just a very insightful conversation. So I think you're going to want to stick around for that. Of course, if you'd like to join me on the podcast, you can email me at dan@thecasualauthor.com, or of course, just head to thecasualauthor.com and fill out the pitch form there. Just let me know more about you, what you're passionate about, what things you write, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you're listening from anywhere, let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to hear about it. If you have any pictures that you want to send my way, let me know where you're listening, and I'd love to hear about it. But until then, thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next week.